Let's play What Caused My Stagia to Knock. Hey guys, what's going on? After pulling the engine out of the Stagia, I've got it sitting on the stand. I'm going to go ahead and take off the intake manifold first, then start digging into the bottom end, see how far I need to go to figure out what the problem is, and we'll figure it out as we go.
Darcy Blues.
Darcy Blues. I find it helps when you... Skill. So same as with the RB30, it looks like there's different length bolts for different parts of this, well, in this case the sump. So the long bolts kind of go at the end here where it's a little bit thicker, and these shorter ones go like the rest of the way, and then on the back here there's one that's like half the length again, right down next to where the prop shaft goes in. Oh! So the only thing I'm not sure about is how much of the diff I need to take apart before I can pull the sump off. So we're going to basically take all these bolts out and try to pull the sump off and then just see. If it doesn't, then I'm guessing I may have to remove some of these bolts around here that hold like the diff cover on and just see what happens. Alright, so now on the underside of the diff here you can see there's a few 14mm bolts going along there. So obviously on this side the diff's in the way, so they couldn't put just a typical, you know, bolt going in this side. So underneath it's like there's a little stud sticking out, and you put a nut on it instead. So we've got to undo these, I think there's 5 nuts under there. To get to that, it looks like I've probably got to remove the oil filter housing. Not just the oil filter, but the filter and the housing as well. So I'll go ahead and, it looks like 4 12mm bolts around there, pull the housing off, and then I'll get a clear shot at the bolts that hold the sump on here. Oh, that was already loose. Oh, oil everywhere. Oil everywhere. Yeah, it's got a very specific bolt pattern. That's cool. Alright, so now that the oil filter housing has been removed, there's a pretty clear shot to these bolts up here, or these nuts I should say, up here. I think they're about a 14mm, so I'll go ahead and crack those off. Oh yeah, there we go. Alright, that's that one. Alright, so that's all the bolts undone underneath, and a bunch of fluid on the floor that I forgot about. So that's a mixture of diff oil and actual oil from the oil filter. So this is getting very messy. I love it. Let's keep going. Look at this. Look at this. Definitely loose. Here's one loosey-goosey.
Got a clear space to walk across.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. It's actually not that heavy too.
That's fine. She's fine.
Okay. Flip it up, flip it up. Alright, so that's the sump off, and you can see here, being an all-wheel drive Nissan, this Stagia, you know, it's all-wheel drive, so it's got this sump through diff or something like that. So that's where the diff is actually bolted to the sump, as you can see there, and the shaft that goes from the diff to out to one of the hubs basically runs through the middle of the sump. So it's a bit of an awkward design. I'm still not really sure why they did that, but all these you know, all-wheel drive RBs, so your Stagias and your GTRs, all have this same kind of setup. So I mean, the good news is we didn't have to remove the diff itself. Basically just had to undo all the bolts that hold the sump on, and then, you know, the whole thing came off actually quite easily. So that's, yeah, that's I'm pretty happy with that. That wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. So, alright, let's go check out the motor. Alright, so that's the sump with the diff removed. And yeah, everything looks okay so far. I mean, there's not a whole lot to be seen right here. Alright, so I can see a couple of little slivers there on the oil pickup. It looks metallic and long and slightly rounded. So I don't know if that's like some bearing material. So that's interesting. I'm going to pull that off, and we're going to see if we can get a closer look at that. So there doesn't appear to be any movement on any of these big ends, like no play at all. So this is number 2 here. This is the one that we suspect has a messed up pin. There's no play or anything there, so that's, you know, a good sign, and it's kind of lending more credibility to the theory that it may be a pin, and all of them feel really tight. So on first inspection, there doesn't seem to be any play in like the big end bearings, so I guess that's a good sign, and it kind of lends more credibility to the theory that it may be one of the gudgeon pins. Just going to keep tearing things apart and check things from there. So next step is the girdle, and yeah, go from there. So when it comes to removing the girdle, I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the RB30. I'm going to start at the outside ends for the bolts and work my way towards the center, because I think that's how you're meant to do it. Just to something about keeping the tension on maybe the crank, the bearings, etc. All even. Again, look, I'm not sure if it's 100% necessary, but I'm going to do it. I'm also using a proper breaker bar this time after a few people got kind of mad at me for using a ratchet last time. So proper breaker bar with 17mm, and then I've got the trolley jack handle for extra torque. So yeah, let's get into it. Alright, so that's all the bolts holding the girdle in place removed. Most of these look, to me, half decent. This middle bearing does look completely chewed up. All the way along the edge there. Completely destroyed the whole way along, and you can see the start of like the copper coming through there. I don't know if the camera's picking that up. But that would explain all the little filings that were in the oil pickup. And could be related to the noise I was hearing. Let's have a look at the crank. So this is the journal that bearing sits on, and there is a small little metal filing just sitting there at the bottom, down there. Okay, so something else I've just noticed is the thrust bearing here on the girdle has all these grooves through it, and you can definitely feel that. It's all these ridges all the way along there, whereas the thrust bearing on the other side, this is nice and smooth. I don't know if that's picking that up. This is nice and smooth all the way along. But this one is just basically completely cooked. It's got some fairly deep ridges all the way along there. It's got these same matching ridges all the way along there. So at the very least, you know, the whole crank's got to come out. And I don't know if that can be saved. But, you know, the theory would be the crank's got to come out and be machined, maybe flat again, but I don't know what the tolerances are for that. I don't know how much you can machine that. I don't know if that's something you can even do. So that's a question for Aaron, my machinist. I'll get in touch with him and I'll see if he thinks we can save this or not. But yeah, bad news, boys. I think we'll be out of action for a little while.
Yeah, so the crankshaft, because it's now got so much end float, because that bearing's worn out and the crank's worn.
Yeah.
These radiuses here start rubbing on the main web of the block.
Yeah.
Luckily,
okay.
you've stopped using it now before it became a majorly big issue.
Yeah,
the block's probably still usable, but that crank's not.
Not usable at all.
No. Once that side's gone, you're pretty well
Wow.
fucked.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So the theory is, I can get another crank from Pete.
Yep.
If I slap that in with some bearings and stuff, what's to stop that from happening again? Like, what causes end float, I suppose, is my main question right now.
Well, you have to figure out why it dragged on this side to pick up. You would have to make sure you check all that before you run it again.
Okay.
You set it back up with the correct end float with the new crank, and then check everything 4 times before you get it back together.
So should the crank not be able to move that much at all?
No.
It shouldn't move at all.
You should have about 5/1000ths of an inch. Got more like 1.5 mils.
Wow.
Maybe 2 mil.
Yeah, okay. let's say there's something gearbox or clutch related that's been pushing on this, right? How does that cause end flow?
Well, if that crank's constantly held up against the bearing, the oil can't get in there to act as the bearing like it's meant to.
So it's just been
and
wearing
they
away.
just continuously wear against each other.
Ah, right, okay. So
if it was, you've got a pull-type clutch, like we'd suspect, it's constantly pulling on that, holding it
Going that
against
way.
that bearing.
yeah,
So that would keep wearing until either a catastrophic failure happened, or your clutch ran out of pressure pulling on the crank. It's very unfortunate too, because it looks like whoever built this last has done all the right things. They've grub screwed the crankshaft so they clean all the calories properly.
yeah,
It looks all nice and clean in here.
yeah.
Didn't do much.
Yeah, it's done like 5,000 Ks.
Yeah. So it would definitely be an issue of the crank being pulled one way.
Yeah,
If
okay.
it's only done that little and it's done that.
That's a pain in the dick. Okay, so in theory, the process from here would be get a new crank, get some new bearings, figure out what's going on with the gearbox or the clutch, and slap it all back together.
Yes. Obviously check bearing clearance
Yeah.
when you go to put the block back together, but
Yeah.
the trouble is the rod bearings are fed oil from the main bearing,
Right.
so that if you have an issue with the main bearing, it can send metal into your rod bearing.
Okay. Yep.
In theory, you should always replace your bearings if you've had it apart, especially if you're changing crankshaft.
Right. Okay.
It stayed on there. This happens quite a lot when you try and take stuff apart. The bearings just stick to the journal
Yeah.
because of the residual oil.
Yeah. It just makes this film.
It looks pretty good, but you can see there's a little bit of wear on it.
Yeah. Hey guys, so I just wanted to jump in here to clear up a little bit of the discussion Aaron and I had at the end of that video, because looking back at the footage now, I kind of realized, you know, maybe the audio wasn't super clear. But the long story cut short is that that crank of mine is basically considered toast. It's, you know, maybe that thrust face isn't repairable. Maybe it is repairable, but for the amount of time and effort and money to try to fix that, you know, he basically advised that I should probably, if I have the option to start with a new crank, which I can easily do, that's probably what I should do. So the plan from here is pick up a spare crank from Pete, who you guys all know from previous videos. So I'm going to pick up his crank actually out of his engine and start fresh with that. So I'm hoping I'll be able to do a whole new video on doing those crank mods that you should do to an RB25 crank while you've got an engine apart. So things like doing the extended collar, clearing out the oil galleries and grub screwing them fresh, and yeah, getting that all kind of machined properly and seeing how that process all works. So that's exciting in itself. I get to actually see that process from start to finish now, and I'll know that the crank I've got will be all measured up, will be all to spec, everything done fresh and properly. So while I'm a little bit bummed about my motor being, you know, unusable, or my crank being unusable, and so therefore my motor being in parts now, there is a big part of me that's excited about, hey, you know, here's this other cool thing I've heard so much about. I actually get to do that to my car, get to film it, show you guys, learn the process of it as well myself. So that's kind of what this has all been about, guys. From the start, it's just been a case of filming what I'm doing and learning as I go. For those of you who haven't sort of been following every video that I've put up, I just want to make it clear that this isn't what I do for a living. This is my hobby. This is my little project car here. And most of the things that I've done in these last few videos, this is as far as I've ever been into an engine. This is as far as I've ever torn an engine down. You know, I've never done this before. So I'm learning as I'm going, picking up advice from people in the know, and yeah, just seeing what I can kind of pick up and put all those things that I'm picking up into practice, and hopefully building a fairly robust engine to stick back in this thing. So as usual, guys, thanks so much for watching. Make sure you do subscribe to the channel, like this video, drop us a comment if you like this, hit us up on Facebook and Instagram, and keep updated with what's going on. And so I'll see you guys in the next video, hopefully with a new crank. Peace.